So just to recap, I'm sure everybody has seen it by now, but if you didn't, Stan Lee passed away just yesterday. Um, the night that I'm recording this, he passed away earlier in the day, but it's going to be yesterday when I upload it. Um, and the man lived a very long life where he brought joy to a lot of people. Um, his creations continue to bring joy to people right now. And that's kind of why I thought that it was important to talk about him and his life. Um, and this is all from an outside perspective, so this is just how his work, his characters have impacted me um, and helped shape me into the person that I am today and have inspired me to live life. And I definitely don't want to go super long into this or ramble, but it certainly is something that I've been thinking about a lot today when this happened. One of the few escapes that I had from my life was comics. At school, I didn't really fit in. I felt like a freak, an outcast a lot of the times. I felt like I didn't belong. Um, and I really felt like nobody understood me and who I am. And looking back at it now, I didn't realize at the time that there's tons of people that feel that way. Maybe the majority doesn't, but there's tons that do. But as a teenager or as a young adolescent or even before then, 9, 10 years old, you don't realize that. And because I didn't have a lot of friends and felt like an outcast, a lot of times I felt like my friends, and I'm sure this sounds stupid to some people, but I'm just trying to be completely honest, I felt like my friends a lot of times were in the comic books I read and the games that I played, the video games I played. I felt like I could get away from feeling that way about myself in those pages and in those games and even in the movies that I watched. And I remember the first movie I was ever excited about seeing in theaters was Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, directed by Sam Raimi. And obviously, while Stan Lee appeared in those movies, he was not hands-on with a lot of the movies, so I'm not trying to say that he was. And he also took a much more figurehead role later on in his life, because the man wrote a lot and did a lot for the comic book industry early on, and took a step back and let other people do things with the characters that he created. But I think it's really important to recognize where those characters came from. Peter Parker's Spider-Man, I always look to as a moral guide in a lot of ways. This really brilliant kid who just couldn't get anything right, didn't have a lot of friends, failed with women, with girls all the time, both in high school and after. He was just kind of a bumbling idiot socially. And I always really saw myself in Peter Parker. And again, a lot of other people have had that same experience. I'm not saying it's unique to me at all. I do think that we all do have our very unique experiences, but there's a lot of these things that we share as well, or that thousands or hundreds of thousands of us share. But I definitely appreciate the characters that Mr. Lee made. I don't know how to express my gratitude. I know that obviously, it's more sentimental now, given the circumstances, but I really do think it's worth saying thank you to Stan Lee and also to Ditko and to Jack Kirby. These characters that they've made really have made an impact on me. The X-Men's another example of a bunch of freaks that don't fit in anywhere else, that flocked to each other. And that's always, I felt like comic books and these characters were always there. And nowadays I'm older and I complain about things like, these characters die, why don't they ever stay dead? Or this thing was really dumbly written by this writer or whatever. as a kid, you don't really think of things that way, and looking back at it, this was one of the mainstays that I had that was always there. Even now, these characters, Spider-Man, the Hulk, the X-Men, even if the majority of people don't read comic books, which I understand it, as big as it is, it's still a niche thing. These movies, the Marvel movies, they're some of the biggest box office grossing movies ever. Ever. It's incredible. It's incredible. These characters are everlasting. They have legacies that are just eternal in a lot of ways. They continue to stay and move people. Infinity War, no spoilers coming out of me here, but it moved people who never thought they'd give a shit about comic books, to be frank. It's incredible. It's really incredible. And it's incredible that Stan Lee not only created these characters, but built up a company of talented people that continue to bring talent in and move talent out when those people need to leave and do other things. And these people now are writing, and have been for a long time, their own stories with these characters that he created. And I think it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. The lessons that you learn from these characters, from these stories, how they impact you, your kids, your friends, that's real. Whether it's fiction or not, that's real. And Stan Lee had a huge impact on my life and who I've become and who I want to be. With great power comes great responsibility. As driven into the ground as that's been by Hollywood now, it's a very powerful statement. There's very few in fictional literature as powerful as that have been such a driving force for not only one character, but so many young men and women who have read those words and heard those words. And I think that these characters and Stan Lee's influence and legacy, they're going to live on. That I think this really does show that we can have an impact. Stan Lee, if you know his background, he wasn't someone that you, looking at as a young man, would ever think would have the impact that he's had. That's nothing against him. He just isn't. He wasn't a successful business owner. He wasn't a successful comics writer at first. He's just a guy. He was just a guy. And for his stories and characters to be able to touch now millions of people's lives and mine, it's just amazing. It's really inspiring. And I think it also shows, that it's insane how long he was here, for sure. But our days are limited. They're counted. And we have a certain amount of time to make an impact on the world around us. But that impact, it can stay here forever. As long as this world's here, it can stay here. And that's just that's nuts. I know I've been a little scatterbrained in this, so thank you so much for sticking it out with me. I hope this wasn't long or rambly at all. I didn't want it to be, but thank you, Stan Lee. Excelsior. And thank you to everybody who goes out of your way to try to create things that inspire other people and try to make them live a better life. That's, there's not words. There's not words for it.